Okay, so as we come to Exodus chapter 14 today, we are in the process of seeing the Israelites make a transition from where to where?
From Egypt to the wilderness.
Okay, Egypt to the wilderness and eventually to Mount Sinai. And we're going to see God deliver them and give them what they need, not only as far as their physical protection, but also taking care of them from the standpoint of what they need. Well, I guess this would include physical protection as well, but food and that type of thing. And the picture I have on the screen this morning is one that obviously I got off the internet. I don't know how accurate this is, or if it was taken on the seabed or what, but this is supposedly a picture taken in the Gulf of Aqaba. Conservative writers generally think that, as we will learn this morning, that the Gulf of Suez was the point at which the Israelites crossed over the Red Sea. This is supposedly at the Gulf of Aqaba. But the Bible doesn't tell us, and it really doesn't matter where they crossed. We do know that they crossed the Red Sea, and not the main body of the Red Sea, obviously, but one of the Gulfs, which was also understood to be part of the Red Sea. There are two Gulfs, that form two fingers that come off the Red Sea, and that was at this point in time determined still to be the Red Sea, and it is even today. It's just a Gulf with a different name. And when they crossed on water that was too deep for them to cross normally. It was water deep enough to swallow up an army, and so that's what we need to keep in mind as we study and as we go along. We will notice a couple of maps in our study this morning that indicate the two different ideas of where the crossing was, or two of the ideas where the crossings were. I just give them for our reference. Again, doesn't really matter. We know by faith that it occurred, and we know that many scientists today try to stifle that idea, but that's nothing new. It will continue to be like that from time immemorial. So as we study, let's just be mindful of what the Scriptures has to say. All right, so when we begin chapter 14, Pharaoh comes to the understanding that in his mind, that he has made a mistake. For whatever reason, and letting the Israelites go, he thinks that was maybe he would have admitted that was a point of weakness for him. I don't know. But after all that had happened in the land of Egypt, all that God had brought upon them. We talked about that Wednesday night as we kind of went back and enumerated the plagues that came upon the people. After all of that, he still has a hard heart against God. And so in verse 1 of chapter 14, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell the sons of Israel to turn back and camp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. You shall camp in front of Baal-zephon, opposite it by the sea." Now, if I were to ask you where these cities were, you would most likely not be able to tell me where they were, or find a map that would pinpoint exactly where they were, because these were ancient cities. We really don't know where they were. And so this is, again, a little bit of the difficulty of trying to find out where exactly the children of Israel were, except we know that they were near the sea, the Red Sea. And so God says, what I want you to do is I want you to act like, or at least it's going to look like to Pharaoh, that you're going to be lost and you're not going to know your way. You've gone out into this wilderness and you've gotten yourself lost. You have no leader. You have no one to guide you. And so Pharaoh's going to say, well, here the Israelites are, and they're easy pickings. Let's go get them. So that's what verse 3 says. And so when Jehovah spoke to Moses and told him to turn back, he said, do that and then camp by the sea. In this particular area, there were mountains on one side, and there was the sea on the other side, and the wilderness in between, and it looked like just exactly what we've stated. And so Pharaoh will say, the land has shut you in. Or as the New American Standard Translation renders it, you will become entangled in the land. And so when they would have headed out of Egypt, what would have been the normal course of travel for people leaving Egypt?
Would have been go up the coastline through Philistia.
Okay, all right. And that's called the way of the sea. They could have taken that route. They could have also, if they had good supplies, could have taken the way of Shur, which goes up the backbone, really, of those mountains that Jerusalem was a part of, that whole hill country there. But instead, God leads them out into the wilderness. And why does he lead them out in that direction?
So they wouldn't have to battle the Philistines.
Okay, so they wouldn't have to battle the Philistines. And so he takes them away from them and he prepares them. Now, as we mentioned in passing Wednesday night, these people are not warriors, they're slaves. And so that is significant from the standpoint that God is not necessarily going to hold training camp for them as far as military matters are concerned, because he's going to fight for them. But they will later on become a people more accustomed to battle, because they will see the Lord fight for them. They will still be in the thick of those things, but they will see the Lord fight for them and deliver them. But not yet. And so instead of taking them out of those two common trade routes, he took them out toward the Red Sea, out to the wilderness where really no people could survive, normally speaking. And so thus brings us to the conclusion that Pharaoh came to. Oh, they're entangled in the land. They don't know where they're going. There's no way that they're going to make it out alive. And so they're going to be weak and they'll be wandering and they'll need a deliverer. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to get them. We're going to bring them back and make them our slaves again. And so Jehovah continues to tell Moses that he would harden Pharaoh's heart. That's exactly what I'll do. I'll harden his heart. I'll bring him out with his people. And then you will see that I will get honor to me. And that's the phrase that Jehovah uses. I will get honor to me through Pharaoh and his hosts and his people. He will follow after you, and then I will take care of him. And so as they go out and they're wandering around, the people of Israel really don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. And so in verse 5, we see what Pharaoh has to say about this. And he says, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people. And they said, what is this we have done that we have let Israel go from serving us? So he made his chariot ready and took his people with him. And so when he learns that they have fled, he says, let's go after them. Let's go get them. Prepare my chariot and prepare these other chariots. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to go back to the phrase that Pharaoh uses here. What is this that we have done to let Israel go from serving us? What's wrong with that statement?
It was God that did it.
Right. It wasn't Pharaoh that just dismissed them. Pharaoh was acting like none of these other things have happened. What is this that we have done? Well, Pharaoh hadn't really done anything but suffer at the hand of the Lord and have a hard heart about it. Pharaoh really had devastated his country. And really, Pharaoh needs these slaves in order to regain his country back, because if he doesn't do that, then the people are going to probably riot and he'll wind up battling and having a civil war. So he knows what to do. That's why he's going back after those Israelites. He feels like he doesn't have a choice. But what was the best choice that Pharaoh could have made?
To accept God.
Yes. He could have turned himself to God, and he could have become humbled like Nebuchadnezzar became humbled and said, you know, I know now that this is Jehovah, this is the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. But he didn't do that. He hardened his heart. And the Lord knew he would do that. He told Moses that he would do that. And so he readied his chariot and his host to go after Israel. And isn't that really the same thing we do oftentimes? We get aggravated and and I'm talking about as a human race, not necessarily as Christians. I hope we don't do this, but we get aggravated and we get mad because we didn't get our way, and we may have some power and authority, and we think, well, I'm going to flex my muscles and I'm going to make sure that people do just exactly what I want them to do. You see heads of countries do that. You see heads of corporations do that. You see heads of families do that. Unfortunately, there have been elders in the Lord's church that have done that. And so that when we get kind of full of ourselves and we get the idea that we're the ones in charge and we're the ones that's leading this business, and you know, then we wind up failing ourselves, failing those that we're supposed to be responsible for, and most of all, failing God. So Pharaoh commanded 600 chosen chariots, plus all of the other chariots in Egypt. And so sometimes we skip over that part. Let's go look at verse 7. Verse 7 of Exodus chapter 14. And he, that is Pharaoh, took 600 select chariots, and all of and the word other in my translation is supplied. It's in italics. And all the chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. So here we go. Pharaoh's taking the best of the best. And I don't know what they would have looked like. Maybe they would have looked something like the wheels and carriages may have looked something like what we had on the screen a while ago. I don't know. But the chosen chariots would have been the most suitable for battle. Maybe the most elaborate too. I don't know. But then all of the other chariots of the kingdom of Egypt were prepared, and they took those out with their commanders to go out with them. And here we are reminded in the passage here, let's look at verse 8. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he chased after the sons of Israel as the sons of Israel were going out boldly. Some of your translations may refer to the spoil that they had taken over the Egyptians. And so the idea here is that God had made them strong. He had sent them out with a high hand. They had spoiled the Egyptians as they left. You remember Moses had been told by the Lord, tell the women to ask of their neighbors for jewels of silver and gold and raiment and other such things. And the Egyptians just piled that on them after the death of the firstborn. And so here they are carrying out all that they have with them. And as the scripture states, they went out with a high hand. But Pharaoh wanted the slaves back. All right, now we come to the point where I mentioned a moment ago, where the people become concerned about this situation. Pharaoh wasn't the only one that had forgotten what God had did to Egypt. The people of Israel forgot too, didn't they? So they, as Pharaoh chases after them with his horses and chariots and horsemen, and they begin to overtake them camping by the sea, the Israelites look up and they see the Egyptians coming. And as they draw near, the sons of Israel said what? Were there no graves in Egypt? Were there no graves in Egypt? I got to thinking about this, and granted, I am so far removed from this situation that maybe I'm talking too boldly about it, speaking too boldly about it, but I really do believe that I would rather die a free man than live the rest of my life as a slave. Now, God forbid something happens and we're taken into slavery. I'm not going to take my own life in order to do that. But I have been given the opportunity to fight for my freedom. But I do believe I'd rather die a free man than live the rest of my life in slavery. But the Israelites said, we had it so good back there. Were there no graves back there? Dustin?
You think that's the contrast just because we have known freedom today? I think it's probably,
May very well be.
But if you've known freedom and then all of a sudden you're put, into slavery, you see that difference. I had a choice, even got picking my clothes, moving right eat fruit out of it. Versus if you come out of slavery, a lot of those things were decided for you. Now you were out to a point where you have to do it of your own free will. And that is hard to some extent, which is probably why you see that contrast there.
Right. Al?
We have this term called institutionalized in prisons, where prisoners would rather be in prison than out in the free world. It seems like this is probably the mindset of the Israelis at this time. We've always had food, even though we had to slave for it.
Right.
We've had care, even though we had to slave for it.
Yeah.
And they're making a choice that they would rather pay something that they know, even though it's the worst thing they could probably have to do, and that to seek out a new life.
Yes, that's right. And we see that today as as the government takes care of so many people. That's really the worst thing for them. It takes away their dignity and their ability to do for themselves, and yet that's what they want, and they have nothing as a result. John?
Do you think they were losing their faith and trust in God to protect them?
Well, it's pretty obvious that they didn't think that he was going to do it. Ken, you have a problem?
Oh, yeah. I actually knew a guy who was in and out of the prisons, and he just finally said to me one day, I'm gonna do something wrong, and I'm gonna go back in there, and they're gonna take care of me the rest of my life. It's just too hard to make it work out there.
Right. Yeah, and unfortunately, once you take that first step and you get in prison for the first time, then when you come out, you're labeled, and obviously for good reason. You've done something to get put in prison, and as a result of that, it makes life harder. And it does. But, this is time to pull ourselves up with our bootstraps and get going. If you have to flip burgers or whatever you have to do. There's stories upon stories upon stories in our country. And I don't want to make this political, but there's people just, coming up like the phoenix out of the ashes, if you will. Murphy, does I see your hand up? Okay. All right. It's George.
That's one of the major reasons that many wars have been fought off our continent. We're inspired to go over and fight the enemy before they get to us because we love freedom.
Right. Yeah.
That's in the national anthem.
Scott.
I think in God's great wisdom, He knew that they'd been there for all these years. Part of His showing them, this is a training regiment, really. It's
Right.
He knew they were going to doubt because He knows. And so He set up these opportunities to defeat people so they can build their faith and they can see. So,
Yes. Yeah.
so hasn't it?
And it's often, how many times do we have to just be brought to our absolute lowest in order to look and say, oh, I have nowhere else to turn. I can't help myself. No one else can help me. Maybe God can do it. So, unfortunately, that's the way we do a lot of times. Okay, so verse 11, they state, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in this wilderness? So they just think for sure that they're goners. Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain that to me? I don't know why, but I don't get it.
Okay. All right, so the Israelites' idea is that if they were still in Egypt and still doing whatever the Egyptians wanted them to do, that they would eventually die a natural death and be buried in Egypt. But they would live out their years. But now, as they see the Egyptians coming toward them, they're backed up against the sea, and the mountains are here, and they're just caught in a closed canyon, as I sometimes say. And so they think they're going to lose their life just like that. And so when we're faced with death at that moment, sometimes we make some choices probably that are not the best to preserve ourselves. So that's what they were trying to do, is just preserve life. They weren't thinking about God, coming and rescue them. They were just thinking about what they could do to preserve their lives. Billy?
It says that, why have you brought us into the wilderness? Haven't they realized by now that the Lord's in charge of this?
Yeah.
They're blaming Moses for something the Lord did.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And Moses, is simply the leader, the messenger, and he's the one that's brought them through. And don't forget that it hasn't been that long ago that the people looked upon Moses as a god in the eyes of Pharaoh. And the Egyptians, even some of the very same advisors that were telling Pharaoh, we need to go after these people. They were looking at Moses as a god, and Pharaoh as his prophet. And so that's how fickle we are. It's your fault. It's your fault. Moses didn't handcuff them and drag them out into the wilderness. He provided freedom for them through God's plan. Ken and then Murphy.
I was just going to say that among the Jews, it was considered just the worst way to die is to not be buried properly. You want to be buried with your family and all
yes.
that. And, I could see where they might want to be buried in Egypt rather than in this outcropping and where no one is ever going to find it. It's a disgrace.
Right.
They didn't want that either.
Yes. It makes sense. Murphy.
They're playing, Jeremy, I use an old expression, they're playing the blame game, we played the game as kids, pin the tail on the donkey. Well, they're trying to pin the blame, and do we not try to sometimes, instead of taking responsibility for ourselves, try to blame others, and sometimes others are to blame, but then if we keep blaming them and sit there and do nothing, we're not helping ourselves, if we think somebody else is to blame, maybe let's work with them and see if we can get through the problem.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good point. Good point. I read something just recently. It said, you're not evil because others have perpetrated evil upon you.
Right.
You're evil by what you do.
That's right.
So that might apply here as well. Appreciate your comments. All right, so they said, didn't we say to you to leave us alone so that we might serve the Egyptians? Wow. Isn't that something? That's some statement to be made, isn't it? And so in verse 12, is not this the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. So that's the outlook that the people have here. And to the point that Dustin made a moment ago, here's people who have been slaves all their lives, but they have quickly forgotten how that they served with rigor. And they have completely forgotten how that they were treated so badly and told, as someone said, when to rise up and work and when to lay down and sleep and to do it over and over and over and over again for this kingdom that has mistreated them. And so that they had forgotten a lot of that, I think. So they thought it'd been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Yes, Murphy?
I had a center column reference, and I went and looked back, chapter 5, verse 21. You know, after they were told to make the bricks and gather your own straw, and you know, don't diminish your quota. And Moses and Aaron come back, verse 20, and then here's what they say: the Lord look upon you and judge, because ye have made our savor to be a horn in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to slay us. That doesn't sound like they want to serve him.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see in the New Testament and say, oh, we've never been a slave to anybody.
Yeah.
Boy, they forget.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So Moses says, fear not, stand still. Or in our vernacular today, settle down. Settle down. We're going to get through this. And so Moses tells the people to have faith, to see and witness the salvation of Jehovah. Moses knew that God had not brought his people out in the wilderness just to die. What good would that have done? What would that have shown Pharaoh? How would he have gotten honor upon him through Pharaoh if that had been the case? And so he's going to show, again, he's teaching two peoples here, the Egyptians, and he's teaching the Israelites. And he's preparing them for the ability to go in and take the land, how they were to do that. And he's showing them how that they need to be obedient. Yes, George?
Talking about the demonstration and how it affected the Egyptians and the Israelites, but the word got around all the people round about, which didn't hurt any, because God was with the people. They were, you know, they understood what was going on.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We'll see that in just a little bit, certainly. And so Moses says, you'll see these Egyptians no more after today. Jehovah shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And so, you know, I don't know if the Israelites were like we are today or not, but imagine what the rumor mill would have been like after Moses had said that. Well, I wonder what he's going to do. Well, is he going to kill them? Yes. What's he going to do? Are we going to fight? He's going to give us supernatural power or something? Or? He said, hold your peace. Hold your peace, stand still, and watch. And so Jehovah said, tell the people, go forward. Why are you crying to me? I brought you out of Egypt. I killed the firstborn. I destroyed a whole nation. Why are you whining? Go forward. Stretch out your hand, Moses, over and divide the sea. Israel shall go on dry ground. When you do that, Pharaoh and his chariots will go into the sea after you, and Jehovah will get honor upon them. And so how did he, I'm not going to ask that question because that's in the next slide. We'll talk about it there. But he says, all Egypt will know that I am Jehovah. Is it important that the nations of the world understand who God is?
Yes.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Isn't it shown here that I'm teaching Egypt something here? And Egypt this is not going to be the last time that we find Egypt and Israel in some kind of situation together.
Right.
But we don't see them putting the people in slavery any longer. And we see God controlling that from the standpoint that he does not allow Israel to go back down there so that can happen again. So as years pass, we will see them in the same story. So the angel of God is employed here. Is this the same angel that passed over the Israelites and killed the firstborn of the Egyptians? We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. All we know that this is a messenger of God. And the messenger of God went and stood between the Israelites and the Egyptians, and the pillar of the cloud went back and stood at the rear of the company between the Israelites and the Egyptians, and that protected them. That kept the Egyptians from coming and doing what they would have liked to have done with the Israelites. And so while the parting of the Red Sea was just a great and wondrous thing, let's not overlook the fact that God protects his people with the pillar of cloud and his messenger the whole night before they crossed through the Red Sea. Because what was going on that whole night?
The east wind was dividing the waters.
That's right. The east wind was coming in and dividing the waters of the Red Sea. After Moses stretched out his hand, God caused that to occur. And so the next morning, the children of Israel walk on the seabed on dry ground. Now, I know some of you have lived in parts of the country where it is very, very dry. And you have seen the devastation that wind can bring upon the ground and how it can dry it out. We've even seen that here in droughts in our portion of our little portion of the world. But to take a sea and to part it and to dry the ground, that's more than just a wind, isn't it? You can't do that overnight. You can't do that overnight unless it's God. And so God he parts those waters. They become a wall on each side, and they walk through on the dry ground. You know, it's kind of funny how that children think about this. We were discussing this with our granddaughters the other day. And one of them said, you know, it would be so amazing to go through the Red Sea and see the fishes right there beside you in these walls of water. So I thought about that, and I thought, yeah, that might very well have been what happened. You might very well could have done that. I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us, but it's certainly possible. But that is an amazing thing to think about. The fish are not laying there on the dry ground, are they? They're still in the water, and the water's standing straight up. And the Israelites go through just as God had told Moses they would do. So as this occurs, yes,
when they go across on dry land, this is not just 20 or 30 people.
Right.
It's a slew of folks going through there.
Yes. At least, 600,000 just in men. And that would be 20 years old and upward, more than likely. Men, they were numbered men ready for battle, and that would have been 20 years old and upward. And so, you've got children, you've got women, and it has been estimated that there were about 1.2 million people that come out of Egypt. And so if that's close, or, then still, if it was 750,000, that'd been a lot of folks with it. That's been a lot of folks. I mean, there's a lot of major cities that don't have that many people. So, or a lot of cities, not necessarily major cities, but a lot of cities. And so they go through on that dry ground, and the pillar of cloud goes away. Of course, it was the pillar of fire at night, because the scripture tells us about that. That goes away, and it's lifted from between the Egyptians and the Israelites, and they say the Israelites are leaving, and they're going through the Red Sea. And I have to think, if I'm just a regular old heretic like Pharaoh, I have to think, am I really going in that? Am I really going in there? He's letting his people, I mean, here's Jehovah. He has devastated Egypt. He's killed my firstborn. Am I really going to go in there after those folks? But Pharaoh's heart was so hard that he sent them in. And when they went in, then what happened?
He died.
Yeah. Moses stretches his hand back over the Red Sea, and the waters came back in full strength over the Egyptians. And the fear and the terror that must have been in the last moments of those Egyptians' lives must have been just something else. Because it talks about how that Jehovah caused the wheels of their chariots to come off. And the scripture says they drave them heavily. In other words, they're trying to get those horses to drag those chariot bases without wheels to get out of there. And they can't do it. An amazing thing occurred. And so we learn from that not so much as one escaped. Arson.
You know, that just shows a lot of faith the Israelites had, even just to go in that situation, seeing the walls of water. You know, it took a lot of faith.
It did take some faith on their part. That's absolutely right. We don't want to discount that. But at the same time, they're there and they see the angel of God and the pillar of cloud go back to protect them. And that's a great faith booster, isn't it? And they see that wind blowing all night and that pillar of fire as the sun sets, that cloud turns into a pillar of fire. And it's right there. And those walls began to build. And when they stepped foot on that dry ground, that's a faith builder, isn't it? But you're right. They did have to have a measure of faith to do that. Yes, Jordan.
I couldn't help but think about James chapter 1 and what it says about testing your faith. We all need that. They needed that, and we need that. There's no way around it because, like you said earlier, we forget all about that stuff. We get concerned with a lot of things we don't need to be. Something I always heard when I was in the military, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff.
Right. Yeah.
As far as God's concerned.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So he took his people through. And so when Jehovah caused the sea to return upon the Egyptians, so not so much as one escaped. And we might also say not so much as one Israelite perished, because they went through as well. The Israelites saw the dead Egyptians on the shore and feared Jehovah greatly and believed. And so here's where that faith comes to its greatest fruition after they had been delivered through. So God had promised to take care of them. And you can see, looking now, as we have mentally gone through this, we're looking back at what the Israelites said previous to this event. And you can understand why God would say, "Why are you murmuring to me? Stand still. Stand still and be at peace." So it's a wonderful thing for the Israelites to experience on this occasion. Anything else about 14 before we move on? Yes.
I've heard it said that the difference between faith and presumption is going through the Red Sea and being drowned by it.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, at the very last, the Egyptians saw that God was fighting for Israel. There before in verse 25.
Read that, John.
It says, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians."
Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, that brings us into chapter 15, where we go from the Red Sea to the wilderness. And the majority of chapter 15 has to do about the Song of Moses. And it has been said, I don't have any proof to say one way or the other, that this was the first poetry ever written. The first words put to song or put to music. And so when you write a song, you have to have the poetry, right? And of course, you have the music that goes along with that, the notes and all of that, and how that poetry is to be sung. But you start with the poetry. That's what makes the foundation and the basis for the song. And so it's possible that this was the first poetry ever written. And so as we read it, we can see that it is also inspired of Jehovah. Let's just go and to chapter 15 and read. Let's read down through verse 21. Maybe we can split this in half, I guess. Maybe have a couple of volunteers read. We'll read 1 through 10, and then we'll read 11 through the rest of that song there. Let's see. How about it, Miss Janice? You read those first 10 verses for us.
Okay. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed glorious. The horse and his rider has he thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he is become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots, his host hath he cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea. The depth has covered them. They sink into the bottom as a stone. Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, has dashed in pieces the enemy. And the greatness of thine excellency, thou hast overthrown them that rose up against thee. Thou sendest forth thy wrath, which consumed them as stone. And with the blast of thy nostrils, and the waters were gathered together, and the flood stood upright as an heap, and the depths were congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoils. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. Thou didst blow with thy wind, and the sea covered them. They sank as lead in the mighty waters.
Okay, Audrey.
Who is like you among the gods, O Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your loving kindness you led the people whom you have redeemed. In your strength you have guided them in your holy habitation. The peoples have heard, they tremble. Anguish has gripped the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were dismayed. The leaders of Moab, trembling grips them. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread fall upon them. By the greatness of your arm, they are motionless as stone, until your people pass over, O Lord, until the people pass over whom you have purchased. You will bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. For the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, and the Lord brought back the waters of the sea on them. But the sons of Israel walked on dry land in the midst of the sea. Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dancing. Miriam answered them, Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and his rider he has hurled into the sea.
Okay, thank you. All right, so in this song of Moses, and we're taking for granted, based on the story that comes behind this in the latter part of this chapter here, that this was done in chronological order. And so, if this indeed was written in chronological order, then as I mentioned earlier, this passage or this song has some prophecy in it. In verses 14 and 15, this goes back to what George mentioned a moment ago. The peoples have heard, and they tremble. Anguish has gripped the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were dismayed. The leaders of Moab trembling grips them. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. And so if indeed this was written following the crossing of the Red Sea, then we see that this is prophecy here. And so we see God's hand in it. We see inspiration. We see this beautiful tribute to Jehovah by Moses and all of those who have sung it. This is not just a song that was sung one time. This is a song of deliverance. This was a song that would have been taught to their sons. What is this story that you're talking about? God bringing us through the Red Sea. Well, you know the song that we sing, my son, about Jehovah throwing the rider and the horse into the sea. That tells about what God did for us back there as we came out of Egypt. And so this would have been something that would have been handed down from generation to generation and sung by them as long as they were a people. So something very monumental. You know, over 200 years ago, the Declaration of Independence was penned. And we still remember that. Now, I don't know if they still teach that in school or not. I think they should if they don't. But we still, those of us that were taught that at an early age, still remember that. We know what that's about. We know about the Bill of Rights. We know about the Constitution, as misused as it is today. We know about all those things. And we know about that because it's been passed down from generation to generation. The same thing would happen here with the Jews. And they would learn how God had delivered their ancestors from the hand of Pharaoh. So now as they leave the sea, they go 3 days' journey into the wilderness of Shur. And when we talk about wilderness, you know, we're talking about an area that's barren, talking about an area that really does not support life, at least support human life to live there for a very long period of time. And so they had no water. And they came finally to this place called Marah. And the waters at Marah were bitter. And so guess what they did when they got to this place where they found this water, and they found, we finally found water, and now we can't even drink it. Well, they grumbled, didn't they? Verse 24 says, so the people grumbled at Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And so Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. He said, cut the tree down, put it in the waters of Marah, and that will make the bitter water sweet. And so that's what he did. And people drunk from that. Those waters became sweet. And it says at the bottom of the bottom of verse 25, there he made for them a statute and a regulation, and there he tested them. I don't know if that's referring to the water of Marah, the test, or if he's talking about here, and I believe he's talking about what he says next in verse 26. And he, that is Moses, said, if you will give earnest heed to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have put on the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, am your healer. And so this statute and this ordinance that Jehovah brings upon the people is reminding them of the very thing he just delivered them from. All of those issues that they had, that the Egyptians had to deal with. all those life-changing events through the plagues. He says, if you follow after me, I'm not going to bring those upon you. And so verse 27, then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there beside the waters. So the inference is then that if you don't do what I tell you, then I will bring those plagues upon you. So we're going to see from here on out, as they go through the wilderness and they make decisions that are not very good for them, that there are plagues that God brings upon them. Not necessarily the exact same ones in Egypt, but similar plagues. And so before we conclude our study this morning, I want to just, since we've talked about crossing the Red Sea, I'll show you a couple of maps. Now I know that you can't see this. Let me see if I can't walk us through it. On the northwestern side of this map, you see the blue line, the dotted blue line. Those cities are numbered. And so city number 1 is Ramses in Goshen, where they left from. City number 2 is Succoth. That was just simply a camping place where they camped in booths or tents. City number 3 is supposedly Pi-hahiroth. And this little area right here is the Gulf of Suez, and that's where most conservative folks think they crossed the Red Sea. And so from there they went over into the wilderness of Etham, where they came down to Mara, had the bitter water, and then down number 5 to Elim. So that's how far we've gotten in our journey with the Israelites so far as they have come out of the land of Egypt. Roughly a month and 15 days. We'll learn from chapter 16 specifically about that next Lord's Day morning, Lord willing. And so I might point out as well, over here at the tip of the Gulf of Aqaba, there's a city called Ezion Geber. I don't know if it was named that at that point in time or not, but that's where later on Solomon has a navy. This map shows the crossing at the Gulf of Aqaba. You see the dotted red lines, and this suggests kind of that the people came out of Goshen and kind of formed a party there at Succoth, but that's not what the scriptures tell us. So they travel over. It really doesn't show any of those other cities because they can't pinpoint those. But it does show a crossing there at the Gulf of Aqaba. And this, instead of showing the wilderness of Sinai in between the two gulfs, it shows that to the east of the Gulf of Aqaba, which is also, I believe, incorrect. And so I just wanted to show you that, just to show you how far apart the ideas are about these crossings. Yes, Billy?
They came out of Egypt, and that place where they camped by the water was their first camping place. That couldn't have been no more than 24 or 36 hours away at the extreme.
Well, they did, they did camp, they did camp at Succoth.
But that's where the water is.
And, yeah, it is nearby the sea, the Red Sea. But then, after Succoth, they went down. And from what chapter 14 tells us, it looks like the Lord had them kind of wander around that area for just a little bit of a period of time. We don't know exactly how long. If you go back to verse 2 of chapter 14, tell the sons of Israel to turn back and camp before Pi-hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. Now this is after they had camped in Succoth. They had come down into the wilderness of the Red Sea, and they had camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. You find that in verse 20 of chapter 13. And so they go from Succoth to Etham, then down to somewhere that we're not told, and when he tells them to double back to Pi-hahiroth. So we really don't know what period of time elapsed there. But it would not, it seems like to me that it would not have been a very long time, because Pharaoh, you know, while he had an opportunity maybe to get over the death of the firstborn, he still has a hard heart and he's coming after them. And so I really don't have an answer about how long that was, but it probably would have been a longer time for them to travel on the other side of the Red Sea down to where they are at the end of our study today than it would have been for them to go to Ramses down to Etham. So anybody have any other ideas about that?
I just said it was God's plan.
Yeah.
Simple.
So however long it was, we do know that by the time they get down to the wilderness of Sin in chapter 16, it's about a month and 15 days. So that's really the only accounting of time that we have. Thank you so much for your attention, comments, and questions this morning. We'll pick up with chapter 16.